The gates of Aurelion should have opened the moment Alpha King Varian stepped through them. Instead, the hounds snarled. Spears turned toward his chest. Rain soaked through his torn cloak, and mud clung to boots that had walked this same stone 1,000 times before. Captain Rowan looked at him the way a man looks at a stranger wearing a dead friend's face. Varian raised his hand, the old command rising in his throat out of pure instinct. Open the gate. No one moved. No wolf lowered its head. No guard stepped aside. A young noble guard shouted first, his voice cracking with fear and certainty. Impostor. The word spread through the courtyard like fire through dry grass. Varian's mind screamed that this was wrong, that he was still himself, that nothing about his blood or his bones had changed. But the kingdom did not smell him anymore. For generations, the royal scent of Aurelion's kings had been law without words. A wolf could walk into any hall, any war room, any bedroom of judgment, and simply be known. Varian had never once, in his entire life, needed to prove who he was, until tonight. Then the great doors of the hall opened, and Lord Emeric stepped into the torchlight. His scent rolled across the courtyard like a wave, ancient and commanding, richer than anything Varian had ever carried. The hounds dropped to their bellies. The council bowed as one. Someone whispered the words that broke Varian's chest in half. All hail the Alpha King. Varian stared down at his own hands, half expecting to find them changed somehow, marked with proof of whatever crime the kingdom believed he had committed. He saw only the same calloused palms he had always had, and that was almost worse than seeing something different. He did not remember running. He remembered blood in his mouth, arrows sparking off stone beside his head, and the black mouth of the low market swallowing him whole. He collapsed against a wooden door, breath tearing out of him, and the door gave way beneath his weight. A woman stood over him with a candle in one hand and a blade in the other. She did not scream. She only tilted her head, nostrils flaring, reading him the way other people read a face. You smell like a man who lost something no one can see. Varian could barely speak through the pain in his ribs. Can you find it? The woman lowered the blade, though her eyes stayed sharp with old, private grief. Only if you stop asking the throne to tell me who you are. Her name was Evelyn Moss, and she had no idea yet that the fate of an entire kingdom had just bled onto her floor. In Aurelion, scent was not simply a sense, it was law. A wolf's scent decided who entered the noble quarter and who was turned away at the gate. It decided who could give testimony in a trial, who could claim a mate, who could be trusted with a blade, and who was quietly erased from the pack registry as though they had never been born. Varian had grown up wrapped in the privilege of that law. He had never needed to speak before people believed him. Evelyn had grown up on the other side of it. Her father had been a scent-faded wolf, his own scent thinned by illness and hard years, and one night the noble quarter's watch had dragged him away on nothing but a single line written by an official who never once questioned him. His scent does not belong here. No witness was called. No object was examined. No one listened to the sound of an innocent man's voice. He died in a cold cell months later, and the kingdom simply moved on, because a scent report was treated as truer than any human word. Evelyn had spent every year since then perfuming for the people the noble world refused to smell: widows, omegas, old soldiers, and children chased from the market gates for smelling like smoke and poverty instead of silk. She did not know that far above her, inside the Royal Scent Academy, a secret circle called the White Musk Court had already decided that thrones did not need true kings. They only needed the right scent standing on the right stone. Evelyn hid Varian in the small back room behind her shop, half out of pity and half out of the stubborn refusal to let a wounded creature die on her doorstep. He was proud even while bleeding, demanding she help him restore his royal scent as though she owed the crown anything at all. "I don't make perfume for thrones," she told him flatly. "I make it for people the world has already forgotten." But her nose would not let her rest. Beneath the layers clinging to his skin, she found something that made her breath catch. There was ash from some distant war. There was the copper tang of a broken oath. There was raw animal fear. There was the strange, wrong texture of borrowed skin, as though someone else's identity had been stitched loosely over his own. And beneath every single layer, buried so deep it was almost a whisper, there was a true scent that did not command her at all. It simply reached for her. Beneath ash, fear, guilt, and borrowed skin, there was one scent that reached for her without commanding. Evelyn stepped back so fast she knocked over a rack of dried petals. She knew what that reaching scent meant. She had heard stories of it her entire life, the mate call that supposedly could not lie. "Mate's scent is still scent," she said, more to herself than to him. Varian frowned, confused by the sudden coldness in her voice. "And scent has lied to my family before," she added, quieter now, the old wound rising in her throat. When she pressed her fingers briefly to his wrist to check the wound there, something shifted inside her, subtle as smoke slipping through a cracked window. A thread of his true scent settled onto her skin and refused to leave. That night, staring into a small cracked mirror, Evelyn realized she could no longer catch the familiar smell of her own hair. Every hidden true scent made her own scent harder to find. The curse did not steal her nose. It stole the scent by which she knew herself. She had lived with this curse quietly for years, holding memory scents for people who could not afford to keep their own history safe. A dead husband's coat, a missing child's hair ribbon, a wrongly accused father's calloused hands, and every unclaimed truth she carried had worn away a little more of herself. Now this wounded, arrogant king had added his own truth to the pile she was already drowning in. "Your scent is not gone," she finally told him, once his wounds were bound and his breathing had steadied. "It is buried under everything your crown never answered for." Varian's pride flared instantly. "Then help me answer for it," he snapped. "Help me become king again." Evelyn met his eyes without flinching. "Do you want to smell like a king again? Or do you want them to know you when scent fails?" He had no answer ready for that. For the first time since the gates had turned against him, Varian understood that whatever he had lost was not going to be handed back to him for free. Over the following days, Evelyn explained what she had discovered. His royal scent was not a simple stain that could be washed away with oils and salt. It had been locked beneath 5 distinct layers, and each layer was tied to something real, a mistake, a silence, a decision the crown had made, and never been forced to answer for. There was ash from a war he had let drag on too long. There was the blood of a false oath, from men who had sworn loyalty to him and been betrayed by his own inattention. There was musk born from fear, a fear the weakest wolves in his kingdom had learned to associate with his name. There was borrowed skin, the mark of an identity stolen and worn against him, and beneath it all sat something Evelyn refused to soften for him. Throne guilt, the specific, unmistakable residue of the very law that had killed her father. To reach his true scent, Varian would have to walk back through the places that had built the mask now smothering him, and face what each one had cost. They started at the nursery of first breath, where his mother had once pressed her mouth to his tiny ear and whispered the first oath he ever carried. before crowns and councils had taught him anything about command. Evelyn found the faintest trace of a boy who had simply wanted to be loved by his pack, and for a moment Varian looked almost young again. Then they went to the war hall, cold and echoing, and the ash layer began to loosen as he was forced to remember which battles he had chosen out of pride rather than necessity. At the trial chamber, his stomach turned to stone. This was where scent tests like the one that condemned Evelyn's father had been carried out for years, where a single sniff from an official had been allowed to outweigh a lifetime of honest testimony. Throne guilt tightened around him like a collar. At the border road, where scentless wolves were quietly stripped from the pack registry and left to fend for themselves outside the walls, an old elder named Mael watched Varian with tired, unreadable eyes and said nothing at all, which somehow felt worse than any accusation, and at the old wolf shrine they found the oldest layer of memory, where scent, oath, blood, and witness had once all been required together before anyone was declared truthful. Evelyn began to understand that Aurelion had not always trusted scent alone. It had chosen to, slowly, because it was easier than listening. At every stop, she watched Varian carry the weight differently than she expected. He did not argue that the old ways had been right. He did not insist that his crown deserved patience while it learned better habits. Instead, he grew quieter with each location, as if the walls themselves were reciting a list of debts he had never once thought to count. By the time they left the old wolf shrine that first evening, he asked her a question she had not expected from a king who once believed his scent alone, was proof enough of his worth. "How many of these places did you already know before you ever met me?" Evelyn did not answer right away. "All of them," she finally said. "My father used to walk me past everyone when I was small, so I would understand exactly what kind of kingdom I was being raised inside." Varian said nothing more that night, but something in the way he studied the shrine's worn stone told her the lesson had landed somewhere it could not easily be shaken loose. Walking through the low market as a nameless, wounded stranger taught Varian more than a decade on the throne ever had. He watched an Omega turned away from giving testimony in a public dispute because her scent was judged too faint to be trusted. He watched a Lowborn washerwoman rub cheap, stinging musk into her skin just to be allowed through the noble market gates without being stopped and searched. He watched an old soldier, gray-muzzled and proud, denied his pension because a clerical error had linked his scent to the wrong pack file. He watched a child chased from a doorway for smelling like gutter smoke instead of clean linen. Evelyn brought him to Elder Mael's small home at the edge of the border road, and the old wolf, once trusted advisor to 3 separate alpha kings, spoke without bitterness, only exhaustion. A law built to find impostors became a knife for anyone the court did not want to smell. Varian tried to argue that the scent law existed to protect the throne from exactly the kind of deception now stalking him. Evelyn's answer was quiet and merciless. A throne protected by scent alone will always fear people who cannot afford perfume. Something in Varian cracked open a little further. He was no longer simply a man trying to reclaim his crown. He was standing, for the first time, inside the very system he had once signed into law, feeling its teeth against his own throat. They found an abandoned safe house on the edge of the low market, one of several places Evelyn used to store what she called her Lowborn scent archive. Dozens of small sealed jars holding the last true sense of people history had tried to erase. A dead mother's coat, a missing child's hair, a wrongly imprisoned father's worn, calloused palms, a displaced family's old front door. These were not simple souvenirs to Evelyn. They were promises she had made to people the noble court refused to remember. A young guard found his way to their hiding place one evening, carrying what Evelyn's nose read instantly as loyalty. Barrack's leather, honest fear. The faint trace of an oath sworn to Varian years earlier. Rowan, who had also found them by then, narrowed his eyes at the boy and hesitated. Evelyn did not. Her whole life she had trusted her nose above everything else, and her nose told her this scent could not lie. She let the guard inside. That night, soldiers loyal to Emeric struck the safe house under cover of darkness. The guard's loyalty scent had been artificially layered over him by the white musk court, a false loyalty scent engineered to fool even a trained perfumer's nose. Rowan took a blade meant for Varian's back and went down hard. Little Pippin, a lowborn boy who ran messages for Evelyn, was nearly dragged away before Varian tore free of the chaos to pull him clear. Fire caught the old wooden shelves where the archive was kept, and Evelyn watched, frozen, as jar after jar of irreplaceable memory shattered and burned. She had trusted one false scent, and 100 true scents burned for it. Later, coughing in the ruined shell of the safe house, Evelyn knelt among broken glass and ash that had once been someone's mother, someone's missing child, someone's stolen years. Old perfumer Nira arrived to help tend the wounded, and found Evelyn staring blankly at her own soot-streaked hands. "A scent is a witness," Nira told her gently, "not a judge." Evelyn's voice, when it finally came, was raw. A true nose can still follow a false trail. It was the moment everything she believed about herself cracked apart and had to be rebuilt from nothing. Pippin sat against a broken beam nearby, arms wrapped around his knees, refusing to meet her eyes. He had trusted her judgment completely, the way children trust adults who seem certain of everything, and that trust had nearly gotten him dragged away in chains. Rowan, bandaged and pale, said nothing accusatory at all, which somehow cut deeper than any harsh word could have. He simply looked at her once, then looked away. And Evelyn understood that some kinds of forgiveness could not be rushed no matter how badly she wanted them. Varian knelt beside her in the wreckage, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him without either of them reaching for the other. "You are not the first person a false scent has ever fooled," he said quietly. Evelyn shook her head, unwilling to accept the comfort so easily. "I am supposed to be the one person in this kingdom it cannot fool," she said. "That was never true," Varian answered. "Not for me. Not for you. Not for anyone who has ever trusted a single sense over the people standing in front of them." It did not undo the damage. It did not bring back the jars shattered in the ash. But it planted the first seed of the system she would build in the days that followed, one that no longer asked her nose to carry the entire weight of the truth alone. Out of the wreckage, Evelyn built something new. She called it the scent ledger, and it demanded far more than a single nose could ever provide. It required scent memory, the testimony of someone who had known a person before power or fear had touched them. It required oath trace, the record of vows once spoken and witnessed. It required wound scent, honest evidence carried in old injuries that could not be faked. It required object witness, items that held true history no perfume could counterfeit. It required pack reaction, how ordinary wolves responded once royal musk no longer forced their instincts. It required hound confirmation, whether trained hounds reacted to a true layer or only to whatever sat on the surface. And it required a contradiction record, a written account of any scent so flawless it stopped resembling anything a living creature could actually carry. Every time a true scent was confirmed through witness rather than instinct alone, something strange happened to Evelyn. a small, faded piece of her own scent returned. Not all at once, not painlessly, but enough that one morning she caught, faintly, the scent of cheap soap on her own hands again, for the first time in weeks. They gave Evelyn back to herself. One witnessed scent at a time, she turned the ledger on Varian next, refusing to simply trust what her nose told her about him anymore. His mother's handkerchief still carried the trace of that first whispered oath. An old war scar matched precisely what she had learned at the war hall. Rowan, recovering but stubborn, gave testimony about oaths sworn between them years before any curse had touched Varian's skin. Elder Male recalled the exact sound and scent of a young alpha's voice giving his very first command. An old hound brought forward and washed clean with moon salt finally lowered its head, not because of royal musk, but because the false ash layered over Varian had been washed away enough for the truth beneath to reach it. For the first time in his life, Varian was recognized by more than the scent he had been born with. He was recognized by people who remembered him. While Evelyn rebuilt her ledger from ashes, Lord Emeric moved quickly to secure his stolen throne. He staged a grand public scent trial in the Great Hall, filling the room with his impossibly perfect royal musk. Hounds dropped to their bellies the moment he entered. The council bowed without hesitation. Lady Sorrel, trembling slightly, confirmed his scent as unmistakably royal. Emeric declared Varian a cursed impostor, a broken pretender clinging to a throne that had already rejected him. Evelyn, standing quietly at the back of the hall, caught something none of the nobles seemed to notice. There was no fatigue in Emeric's scent. There was no fear. There was no memory layered beneath the surface, no old guilt, no trace of a life actually lived inside that skin. "He does not smell like a king," she said, low enough for only those nearest her to hear. "He smells like a crown no one has worn." Emeric's eyes found her across the hall, and something cold flickered behind his composed smile. He understood instantly that this Lowborn Perfumer was the single greatest threat to everything the White Musk Court had built. He ordered Lowborn Perfumers rounded up across the city, scent records outside the Royal Academy burned, and declared Evelyn's scent ledger an act of open treason. Standing before his gathered supporters, he made no attempt to hide his true philosophy. A crown is only a story the pack agrees to smell. It was, in its own twisted way, an honest confession. Evelyn led Varian to the trial chamber, the same cold stone room where her father's fate had been sealed by a single careless line of ink. The old record still existed, gathering dust in a locked archive. No noble had bothered to revisit in years. There was no witness testimony recorded anywhere in the file. There was no object evidence. There was no independent verification of any kind. There was only a scent report and 5 damning words. "His scent does not belong here." Varian read the words twice, before his stomach fully understood what his mind already knew. This execution of justice, if it could even be called that, had been carried out entirely under a law he himself had signed years before it happened. A law allowing scent testimony to override spoken testimony whenever the noble quarter felt threatened. He had not personally condemned Evelyn's father, but his signature had built the room this man died in. Evelyn did not raise her voice. She simply asked the question that had haunted her for years. How many people did your law make voiceless because their scent was inconvenient? Varian had no defense to offer her, and for once, he did not try to build one. "My crown did not lock your father's cell," he said quietly, "but it made the key smell like justice." He forced himself to keep going, unwilling to hide behind the comfort of vague apology. "I thought scent made truth faster. It only made injustice easier to perfume." Evelyn did not forgive him in that room. She was not ready, and she made no pretense otherwise. But for the first time, she watched him stand inside the wreckage of his own decisions, without flinching away from it. And that, at least, was something she had never expected a king to do. Their final stop before the reckoning was the Old Wolf Shrine, an ancient and half-forgotten place where scent, oath, blood, memory, and witness had once all been required together. Long before the court decided scent alone was enough, Evelyn prepared a cleansing oil from fever leaf, moon salt, ash gathered from the war hall, water drawn from the first breath basin, fur from an old and faithful hound, a few drops of Varian's own blood, and one final ingredient that made him go very still. A small torn piece of fabric that had once belonged to Evelyn's father. "Why do you have that here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Evelyn met his eyes steadily. "The people your law erased have to be present when your royal scent returns. Otherwise, it isn't truth. It's just power again." When the oil touched his skin, the final locked layer of his royal scent began to open, but it did not rise as the pure commanding force he remembered from before the curse. It carried guilt inside it now. It carried witness. It carried the weight of survival and the responsibility that came with it. "If they only recognize the part of you that commands," Evelyn said softly, watching the change settle over him. "They have not recognized you." Varian did not ask whether his royal scent was finally strong enough. He asked a different question instead, one that told her more about the man he had become than any amount of pride ever could. Who else must witness it? They returned to the capital on the very day Emeric had chosen for his coronation trial, and the great hall erupted into chaos. The instant Varian walked through the doors, some hounds snarled at him out of old, conditioned instinct. Others hesitated, confused, torn between two competing scents for the first time in living memory. The pack itself seemed to split down an invisible line. Emeric demanded an immediate scent test, certain that his engineered perfection would win outright. If scent alone decided the outcome, he would have been right. His musk was flawless, richer and more commanding than anything a living wolf could naturally produce. But Evelyn stepped forward with her ledger open in her hands, and she did not ask the court to simply smell the truth. She asked them to witness it. She called for first breath memory, oath trace, wound scent, object witness, hound reaction, once royal musk no longer forced instinct, and testimony from anyone who had known Varian before he ever wore a crown. Emeric sneered at her, calling her nothing more than a lowborn perfumer with no right to judge royal scent at all. Evelyn's answer rang clearly through the stunned hall. A crown that fears witnesses is only perfume on a corpse. Lady Sorel, hands trembling, examined Emeric's scent a second time, this time searching beneath the surface, as Evelyn had taught her. There was no memory layer. There was no old wound. There was no fatigue, no fear, no guilt. Nothing that marked him as a creature who had actually lived a single day of his claimed history. There was only formula. Rowan gave testimony of oaths sworn to Varian long before any curse had ever touched him. Mail spoke of the exact voice and scent of a very young alpha giving his very first command, decades ago. Old hounds, washed clean of royal musk with moon salt, turned unmistakably toward Varian, drawn by something beneath the surface rather than something painted over it. Surviving Lowborn Perfumers, defying Emeric's earlier raids, brought forward the scent records he had not yet managed to destroy. Each new witness strengthened the ledger, and each true confirmation gave Evelyn back one more small fragment of herself. They gave Evelyn back to herself, one witnessed scent at a time. Cornered by evidence he could not perfume away, Emeric's composure finally broke into something colder and more honest. "Why steal a throne with blood?" he said, looking out at the hall with something close to pity for all of them. "When I can make the kingdom breathe me in." As the truth settled over the hall, the scent-breaking curse binding Varian's royal scent finally began to unravel. It rose ancient and unmistakable, stronger than it had ever been before the curse first took it from him. Wolves across the hall instinctively began to drop to their knees. But Varian did not let the moment end there, and he did not let instinct decide what happened next. He raised his voice, not as a command that forced obedience, but as a plain and simple truth spoken aloud. "If you kneel only because you smell me, then Emeric has already won." The hall fell utterly silent. Varian turned to face the full council and confessed everything he had spent the last several days learning to carry. He admitted that he had let royal scent replace real investigation for far too long. He admitted that he had allowed scent testimony to outweigh the honest words of his own people. He admitted that scent-fated wolves had been abandoned by a system he never bothered to question. He admitted that low-born citizens had been treated as suspects for the simple crime of smelling poor. He admitted, most painfully of all, that his own law had silenced Evelyn's father in the very room where he died. He looked directly at Evelyn as he spoke his next words. "You found me when I smelled like no one." Then he turned back to the watching court. "That means the kingdom must learn to recognize more than scent." Emeric was arrested where he stood, not because Varian's scent had finally overpowered his, but because the ledger Evelyn built from the ashes of her own worst mistake proved every part of his deception: the false musk, the altered archives, the bribed houndmasters, the burned Lowborn records, all of it laid bare for the entire court to see. In the days that followed, Varian signed what would come to be known across Aurelion as the True Bond Edict. The throne could no longer be confirmed by royal scent alone. Scent tests could no longer stand as the sole evidence in any trial. Lowborn wolves, scent-fated elders, and omegas were granted the full and unquestioned right to testify. Every scent accusation now required a witness, physical evidence, and a verified oath record before it could carry any legal weight. The Royal Scent Academy was required to open its archives to independent perfumers outside noble control. Hounds used in any formal judgment had to be examined and confirmed by multiple, unaffiliated houndmasters. Masking one's scent for personal safety was no longer treated as a crime. Mate bonds could never again be confirmed or denied by scent evidence alone. Wolves who lost their scent to curses, trauma, age, or poison could never again be stripped of their place in the pack because of it. The Lowborn scent archive Evelyn had built and lost was formally recognized as a protected memory record belonging to the entire kingdom, not simply to her, and a new role was created specifically for her, granting the Keeper of True Scents the standing authority to demand a full ledger review before any scent trial could proceed. The strongest line of the entire edict was carved above the trial chamber doors within the month. No wolf shall lose name, bond, home, or crown by scent alone. Evelyn became Keeper of True Scents not because a king loved her, but because the system she had built from grief and failure had proven strong enough to hold an entire kingdom accountable. Varian never again let his royal scent stand alone as the whole of his authority. He let it remain part of the truth, but never again the entirety of it. Some time after the edict was signed, Varian walked to Evelyn's small shop alone. No guards trailed behind him. No royal procession announced his arrival. He carried with him several jars rescued from the wreckage of the burned safe house, scents that had somehow survived the fire. Evelyn asked whether he had come seeking a fresh royal perfume for some new ceremony. He told her no. He had come to ask where a new archive might be built for the Lowborn, so that ordinary people would never again be quietly erased from their own kingdom's memory. Evelyn said nothing for a long moment, simply studying him in the lamplight. It was the first time a king had ever asked her how to protect her people before asking anything at all for himself. "You were the first person to know me when the kingdom could not smell me," Varian said quietly. Evelyn shook her head, unwilling to let the moment become softer than it had earned the right to be. "I did not know you," she said. "I followed what remained when the throne fell silent." He did not claim a mate bond that evening. He did not ask for forgivenesses he had not yet fully earned. Evelyn, in turn, offered no easy kiss, no whispered absolution. She simply set a list of unresolved, scent-faded cases on the counter between them and told him to start there. Whatever grew between them after that would grow slowly, built on accountability instead of instinct, on choice instead of command. A year passed. Aurelion did not abandon royal scent entirely, but it no longer knelt before it as though scent alone contained the whole of the truth. The scent ledger became a permanent fixture of the court, consulted before any serious judgment was passed. Lowborn perfumers were welcomed as witnesses in trials that once would have dismissed them outright. Scent-faded elders returned to seats on the council they had long been quietly pushed from. Omegas were no longer barred from giving testimony simply because their scent ran soft. The Lowborn scent archive was rebuilt in stone laced with moon salt, strong enough that it would never burn as easily again. Evelyn still had not fully recovered the scent that once belonged only to her. But with every new true scent confirmed by honest witness, another small fragment returned. The smell of cheap soap on her hands, the familiar scent of wood smoke clinging to her old shop, the faint trace of moss flowers her mother used to grow. Pieces of the woman she had been before, she started carrying everyone else's truth alone. One quiet afternoon, a young boy from the noble quarter stood accused before the court, his frightened scent trembling under the weight of suspicion. In another lifetime, the question asked of him would have been simple and cruel. Does his scent belong here? Instead, Varian looked out over the gathered court and asked something entirely different. Who remembers him before fear touched his scent? Evelyn placed the scent ledger on the table before them, her voice calm and certain. Start with what cannot be perfumed. The boy's mother stepped forward first, followed by a neighbor, then an old teacher who remembered him as a toddler chasing hens through the courtyard long before fear had ever touched him. One by one, the court listened instead of simply inhaling judgment from the air, and Evelyn felt the smallest, most familiar warmth settle over her own skin as the truth was witnessed piece by piece. It was not the scent of royalty. It was only the scent of herself, returning slowly, the way it always did now, one honest witness at a time. Varian had once believed a king was known by the scent no impostor could wear. But Evelyn taught him that even the truest scent could be buried, borrowed, or broken. She did not return him to the throne by making him smell royal again. She saved his kingdom by teaching it to recognize truth when scent was no longer enough.